we go. I do a bunch of leather work back there, and there are these little leather nubbins that really hurt your feet when you step on them. I might miss one. I just hit one a few seconds ago. I was like, oh my god, that really hurts. You know, you're punching holes through leather, these little nubbins fly out everywhere. That really hurts. Had a huge power out today for several hours, and that's the reason why I'm charging my power station. Actually came incredibly handy. I need to talk about metaphysical spiritual polarization. I don't know if love is the right word. I enjoy talking about things that other people do not talk about. I guarantee there's not another video on YouTube talking about this. Spiritual or metaphysical polarization. Really simple. Let me give you some examples, and there are many countless examples through history. I don't like to use the word guru. We talk about spiritual adept, spiritual expert, genuine, true metaphysician. Give you some examples. Jesus's, we use the word conflict, would be inaccurate. It was not a conflict or a battle with the devil in the desert. The temptation of Jesus by Satan in the desert, for example, where he's if you'd only stop. Of course, most people are familiar with this. This run through the Bible where Jesus is tempted to be tempted by the devil in the desert. I'm not interested in hopefully you taking affront to this, but there are many countless examples like this, but it is not an ab extra person. That person in ancient Pali is the word Mara. By the way, Mara is just the ancient Pali version for adversary. Like Satan, of course, is not an entity, a separate entity, rather it means adversary, obviously so. Well, what sort of adversary? Why is it that all of these people throughout ancient history that we have records of speak of it as the temptation, the conflict? Why is it that people set themselves upon the metaphysical path are tortured, self-tortured, not literally, although sometimes literally, by these anthropomorphized evils? The notion that Gautama, the historical Buddha, if you will, had the exact same thing regarding Mara. Temptation after temptation. There was not an external persona non grata. These anthropomorphized, concentration of evil, tempting these spiritual gurus. I hate the word guru. I'm sure you hate the word guru too. These were the conflict between the psychophysical self and the transcendent self. I need to make a statement, which of course is an affirmation that ignorance is bliss. Now, while ignorance is bliss, like, well, bliss is great, what's wrong with that? Let me stay in ignorance. Ignorance is bliss, but of course it will and must necessitatively bite everybody, in the behind, in the boo-boo, if you will, to be more, more gentle. I use the word boo-boo. These are not external entities. The temptation of Jesus by Satan was not an external entity. There's Satan, and he's trying to tempt Jesus. Did you notice the fact that this exact same thread runs throughout all of these spiritual or metaphysical, and these are metaphysicians in the truest sense, throughout all of these accounts of different people from different ages? All of a sudden they undergo extreme temptation by the personification of evil. Necessitatively so, this is extremely simple, it is highly logical, and there are other analogies that I could draw, and I will do that here simply, and try to make this video as concise as possible. Ignorant people, by the way, let's talk about the ignorant person, for example. Ignorant people have no inner conflict. They have no free will, because free will is only potential, not actual. An acorn is not an oak tree, yes? What about transcendence, i.e. liberation? What, therefore, is transcendence? The removal of the identification phenomenology that, of course, breeds and perpetuates suffering, bhava-nubhava, becoming and rebecoming, transmigration after transmigration. It is the complete and total primordial agnosis as it is existentially manifest, where there is no conflict. Evil people don't suffer the inner conflict. The general ignorant person does not suffer the inner conflict. These people are not polarized. There is no separation between the existential self and the transcendent self. They are one holos, one entity. These people don't have an inner conflict. They are led around by their desires, their feelings, their whims. You know, the reaction, and like a dog, you know, very predictive. You know, if you were to, not that I'm advocating this, I'm just speaking hypothetically, you know, kick a dog in the butt, it's going to immediately turn around without a single thought passing through its head. Only the reaction of its nervous system, you know, to bite or gnaw your leg off. Arrgh. Completely reactive. These people are the same. There is no polarization within them. There is no separation or inner conflict. The existential self and the transcendent self are on the exact same train track. Where one goes, the other follows, and vice versa. There is no distinction between the two. There is none. Ignorance is bliss. Yes, it is. Ignorant people don't suffer this. There's a huge danger zone to awakening. I've warned this to people for decades now. And many people have come back to me and they said, you know, I didn't really believe you, but you were right. There is a huge danger. I'll talk about those. There's generally 5 zones of being between polarization. First, I'd like to give a simple magnetic analogy. Not that this is a magnet, but this is 100% undeniable. A magnet is quantitatively 100% identical before it becomes a magnet as after it becomes a magnet. Quantitatively identical. Same number of atoms, molecules, weight, on and on and on. 100% identical. What therefore defines a magnet? Since it is not quantitative, it is qualitative. Yes, you know, you could, if this were a neodymium-iron boron slug before it turns into a magnet, you know, you could wave it around this computer, no problem, right? Or, you know, get it near a, you know, a piece of steel. You know, the steel, I've had this happen to me before. You know, the steel will accelerate to my hand, and my hand will be caught between the magnet and the steel itself, and it'll pinch the heck. It's even drawn blood before. This polarization, because that is what defines a magnet, is qualitative, yes? The qualitative polarization of the entirety of the magnet. It is a point source object. The same is true of an individual. Life is undeniably 100%. The consubstantiality, which is basically a fancy word of saying the mixture of, like Kool-Aid is the mixture of what? Sugar water and that powdered garbage that nobody should ever drink. Right? There's Kool-Aid, right? Life is a consubstantiality of matter and spirit. Yes? As long as these are working harmoniously, as in the case of a common ignorant person that identifies with what they see in the mirror, there is no conflict. Where one goes, the other follows. There is no ideation or a hair's worth of distinction between the transcendent self and the existential meat suit. Bob, Sue, Larry, so on and so forth. This is why there's a huge danger to any level of halfway decent awakening, i.e. wisdom. Not intelligence, i.e. episteme, rather gnosis, because wisdom and the transcendent self, from all standpoints of monistic metaphysics, are 100% exactly the same. So when you have this, you enter that danger zone where you start to awaken to the nature of reality, or natura naturans, natural order, and the nature of existence, and the nature of that which you truly are, as in tattva masi, right? You enter the valley of the shadow of death, but also, too, of truth. And there is a danger or a neutral zone from whereby which one starts to polarize. This is spiritual polarization. And have you ever given thought to the fact that these metaphysical gurus, I hate the word guru, you know, suffered these great conflicts, the slings and arrows of Mara and of Satan? These are not separate entities. These are adversaries. You know, they say you're your own worst enemy. During spiritual metaphysical polarization, you are your own worst enemy many, many, not times, but multiplicatives there too. All spiritual people that set themselves upon the path of awakening illumination enter the valley of the shadow of death, but also too of truth, and they suffer due to that. Christianity has this. They say, oh, he's such a tortured man. He was really, really awake. So tortured. If he's just a common dude worried about money and, you know, getting his freak on and drinking on the weekend, none of these people are tortured. No, you don't hear about these people. The common person that doesn't have a brain in their head, like, ugh. You know what I'm talking about. These people are not tortured. They live life like any animal does. They're completely reactive. There is no spiritual polarization. What would polarization be? Well, a magnet has a north pole and a south pole. Right, sure. And of course, you can't take this analogy too far. We'd be talking about the distinction between the meat suit self, i.e. the psychophysical self, and the transcendent self. Under perfect mixture, everything is homogeneous blend. It's like, this is just one thing only. It's like, no, there's two things in there, but they're blended so perfectly. And the solution or matrix for that blending is primordial agnosis, is ignorance. It's perfectly blended. You know, the ignorant person is no different than the spiritual person that is buried deeply within. And it's not actually in there. There's no signal in the radio, no fire in this TV, but you get the point. That's what life is, the consubstantiality between matter and spirit. When perfectly blended, and that blending agent for perfection is, of course, ignorance. There is no conflict. There is, of course, suffering and death, as there is with any being, obviously so. You can be ignorant and happy and lead life to the fullest, but that, of course, is not an examined life. You know, no animal generally feels sorry for itself. Some higher intelligent life forms might get down and out or feel sorry for themselves, but not many, almost none. You know, percentage-wise, it's probably way less than 1,000th of 1%. Give a roller coaster analogy. You've got 5 stages of this, and this is kind of a crude analogy, but it helps people see it. You know, you're riding the roller coaster, fun, whee, you know, the peak and valley, oh Lord, yeah, but there's going to be another one over here, whee, you know, you're just riding the roller coaster. Most of us, you know, we have to wait in line to ride a roller coaster. We ride it once, maybe twice in a day. Whee, that's so much fun, yeah. There are other people that are aware of the roller coaster. Of course, why would they get on it to begin with? They're riding it, say it's a non-stop roller coaster. Now you're finally aware that the roller coaster, you know, is crushing your spine and shaking your head, probably going to give you a stroke because it's basically rattling your brain like a martini that's being heavily shaken. You're aware of it, you're sick, you know. Some of these people have ridden roller coasters for hours to set records. You know, so much fun, like, oh my God, you just want to puke. It's awful. You know, you're aware of what the roller coaster is. It's just, you know, it's just an endless pain in the butt. Stage number 3. You're aware of how evil the roller coaster is, why it's making you sick. And you're aware that there's a bliss of being, be able to get off of it. You've seen your way off of it, and you remember being off of it for a short period of time. You see the person down on the ground, you know, eating his ice cream cone, standing there nice and peacefully looking at the idiots riding the roller coaster. You want to get off of it. This is where people get depressed and fatalistic and down. They've entered the valley of the shadow of death, but also true of truth and wisdom. There is a huge danger in separating yourself out from ignorance, because if you take it just far enough, you know, like the roller coaster analogy, which is kind of crude, but you get the point. You separate yourself out just enough, i.e. undergo minimal metaphysical spiritual polarization. You have hope, but it's separated just so incrementally such that you will really suffer a lot. I mean, you will. I'm not speaking of things that I read in a book, I'm speaking personally. If you only separate out a little bit, which is what people do, they get sick and depressed. It's like, this is way worse than I was ready, you know, when I was sick and vomiting on the roller coaster. You separate it out just enough to see the world for what it is, the roller coaster for what it's like. All these people are evil and corrupt. Everybody's just out for themselves, for money, power. You know, you have a completely pessimistic view of life and countless other things. Everybody undergoes this that separates themselves out from that. Slightly polarized. It is invariable. It must happen. It is necessitated. Stage number 4. You know how to get off of it and how to get off of it fully. And you set yourself on that, so instead of just being slightly separated, you're making your way towards fully separated. Fully separated and still alive is the old saying, dead man walking. So there are 5 stages. The ancient, like the Four Noble Truths, if you will, is taken from an old Vedic saying of doctors. There's suffering, you acknowledge the suffering, you understand then the source of suffering, which is only like, being sick. You've seen the nature of reality, you've slightly separated. It's like you're still suffering. You're suffering, and you know the reason for the source of suffering, but you've only slightly polarized yourself away from the psychophysical. Well, that's not good enough. It's like, I know, like back in February when I was sick as a dog, it's like, I'm suffering, I have the coof, I know I have the coof, but how do I get rid The third is the path to the end of suffering, and of course, number 4 is application of the medicine. It's an old Ayurvedic doctor's thing from ancient times. Suffering, the source of suffering, knowing how to get out of the suffering, and 4 is the application of the medicine. If you only make it to stage 2, just like a roller coaster analogy, when you can actually slightly separate yourself, you're going to suffer more. That's not my opinion or feeling of belief. I can tell you that personally. I can tell you that everybody else that does it. So if you set yourself on that path, you're setting yourself up for danger. That's not to try to keep anybody from it, but it means that if you only slightly separate, it'll be worse than the suffering that you had as just a pure being of ignorance. Spiritual polarization. There's a reason why these great metaphysicians, I'll just say great metaphysicians, I hate the word guru. Jesus was not, tempted and conjured, and all the other things were done by Satan in the desert. It wasn't a separate entity. Gautama was not tempted by a separate entity. What is separate? It's the inner struggle. So, the inner struggle. Struggle with what and what? The existential persona non grata and the transcendent self. This is what polarization does. The magnet analogy is better than the roller coaster analogy. Anyway, I hope I made that more clear. Nobody else has a video on spiritual polarization, but that is what it is. And necessitatively, it's hyperlogical. It doesn't require you to suspend belief. I know people say, suspend disbelief. No, I'm talking about suspending belief. It doesn't require you to believe craziness. Like, we just got to believe it. It's like, no, it's hyper-rational, it's hyperlogical. Nothing in genuine metaphysics is irrational or, cause you to believe in craziness that you find in religious absurdities, of which there are countless million religious absurdities. I just need to believe it. Doesn't make any sense. I just need to believe it. This stuff is extremely logical. I've given you a roller coaster analogy and a magnet analogy. Neither analogy is perfect, but they're pretty good at illuminating things. And I can confirm this to you flat out that that is the case. This is the reason why these spiritual masters, these metaphysicians, were tortured by Satan and Mara. These were not separate entities. These were the very beings themselves who were going after themselves. I hope I clarified that. I tried to make this video short and sweet and use a couple simple analogies to illuminate it. If you like these videos, you want to email me anything, my email's in the description below. Also, too, any donation link for $1 here or there. You can tell me how much you hated it. All right, send me an email about why you disagree about it. Let me know. I read every comment, even the nasty comments. So, Lux Veritas. Have a great weekend. Thank you.